So last time we clarified that yes, I have a Netflix subscription, they make original programming, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And you'll have no doubt seen the title of this video, and I have to say, this is not one of the hits, it's one of the misses. I think almost unanimously, people seem to be on that side of the fence. But like with Bright, I do want to cover the good before the bad. But before I do, I think there are a couple of very interesting warning signs that we should have been really paying more attention to. One, this wasn't originally meant to be a Cloverfield film. It was the God Particle and its own separate thing, kind of like what they did with 10 Cloverfield Lane. But I'll get into that in more detail in a moment. And two, the teaser trailer dropped, and within hours the film itself dropped. That's no hype building or anything like that. That's kind of worrying. Like I say, it's one of the warning signs that we should have spotted. But let's look at the positives of this film, the reasons I wanted to love it. And frankly, again, like with Bright, the cast is pretty decent. There's no massively household names in the same way that Will Smith is, for argument's sake. But they're not unknowns by any stretch of the imagination. One of the reviews I read actually was saying that, there's no one people know here. Well, I can name 4 people off the top of my head without having to think too deeply. I don't have to look at IMDb about them. And I would not consider them unknowns. Gugu Mbatha Raw. She was Kelly in San Junipero of Black Mirror, so of course I'm going to know her, but also Plumette in the live-action Beauty and the Beast. Not unknown. Daniel Bruhl, keeping it on a Disney theme, was Baron Zemo in Civil War. Again, a lot of people have probably seen him, not unknown. Zhang Ziyi, for the international crowd, and, a lot of the Chinese films she's been in have come to the West. She's not an unknown face. Chris O'Dowd, very much well known over here in the UK for things like the IT Crowd, but he has broken into Hollywood, he's done a few roles in films. I wouldn't consider any of those 4 unknowns, and even the people I haven't mentioned, I at least kind of know their faces. They're at least vaguely familiar to me. So I don't understand where this person got this impression. Maybe it was just, like I say, just reinforcing the fact that he wanted to hate it, I don't know. But these are all good people who do their best with the material. I do think that Hamilton's character arc is one of the better things of this entire production. And, it's well played, it's well portrayed. Daniel Bruhl is very lovable in this. You want to be on his side. Everyone here, Chris O'Dowd brings a lot of humour to it because, of course, that's his background. But he plays the dramatic well, as well, and everyone is doing what they can with the raw materials, and you can't complain about that. Again, that isn't the only element. The sci-fi elements of this, are fascinating. As soon as I was aware of the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, it fascinated me, the idea that they were looking for the Higgs boson, called the God Particle, hence the original name of the film. And, what that means. I'm no particle physicist, but the basic idea is it's considered one of the building blocks of the universe. It's very important. It's earned the name quite well. So the idea that it was going to explore that, and sort of how that's made them go into parallel universes, if that was part of the original story, I don't know. All of these different elements, I was just like, this sounds really quite fascinating in the 2 hours that I had to kind of be aware of it and look into it before it dropped. So it had a lot going for it, but like with Bright, it just didn't mesh. Things just didn't work out how they should have done, despite everyone's best intentions. Oren Uziel, I think, if I remember that correctly, and said that correctly, was the guy who wrote the story, and, I think the basic idea of the story, like I say, is great, but it does have that 10 Cloverfield Lane issue of having Cloverfield shoved into it. Now, with 10 Cloverfield Lane, we had a very, very good suspenseful piece, of like kidnapping, really, someone in a bunker, and one of John Goodman's best performances in recent memory. The quiet menace, again, like with Chris O'Dowd, look to the guy who you know to be funny to give really good drama. His quiet menace and everything in there as Howard, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as his captive, everyone gave a great performance in there, and it was only really the weird bit at the end. I mean, I didn't find it too awful, but it really was a tonal shift. I fully concede that at the end. Whereas with this, the Cloverfield elements are woven throughout, and I think it dilutes the core story. The fact that they're trying so hard to tie it into the Clover universe just makes it so less impactful, I think, as a film. Like I say, I do feel Hamilton's story. I do find that when she's on the other side going, well, I could go to this family that's alive, you know, where the children haven't died because of the accident. Or I could go back to mine where my children are dead. It's not a difficult decision in some people's minds. So you can totally agree with her mindset, you know, that she wants to not go back. But it doesn't save a bad film. The idea of this tying of the Cloverfield universe is through this, you know, is very shoehorned. You know, I think we can only blame one person, J.J. Abrams. I think we have to put the blame squarely on his shoulders. He seems to have a fascination with universes, such as the Kelvin timeline, when he took on Star Trek. I'm surprised that The Force Awakens wasn't in a parallel dimension or something. But, you know, it's his fault, I think. I mean, okay, there is the counterpoint. This film on its own may not have been made. It may have also been the problem with The Bunker, or whatever 10 Cloverfield Lane was originally called. It may not have got made, or may not have had as much attention as something that had the Cloverfield name attached to it. And, you know, there was perhaps that intent to at least make sure that a wider audience sees it. And fair enough, you know, I respect that as an idea, you know, trying to make sure that more people see it. But when the art itself suffers, it may have been better not to make it. You know, it sounds really harsh, and I've just said it and gone, that sounds really harsh to myself. But it does. It sounds really harsh, but I think it's true. I think if the art is going to suffer, don't add the bits on. Just see if it'll fly on its own. I mean, maybe they couldn't get funding for it without something else. I don't know. And the only way that they could get it funded was by saying, well, it's part of the Cloverfield universe now, or multiverse, I suppose. But of course, you know, one of the biggest things that this film does give us, and the Cloverfield universe at large, is what Mark Stambler says.
Every time they tested, they risked ripping open the membrane of space-time, smashing together multiple dimensions, shattering reality, and not just on that station, everywhere.
This is clearly the intent of this film. This is what it's meant for. It is meant to be there to say, look, we can now do whatever we want with the Cloverfield world. It doesn't matter anymore. You know, if we want to do it where something happened in World War II, which I believe the next one is, Overlord, we can, because it's a parallel world. They don't need to have referenced it in the future because it didn't happen in that one. And to me, that's a cop-out, you know, as much as anything. I think when you start to kind of try to make it like it's one overarching thing, but you basically do it as like Elseworld stories, that's all you're doing. They're just Elseworld stories. It's not a sequel. You're just using the name to sell a different story. And maybe that's just me. I like my sequels to have some tie-in to other ones. I don't like them to be on their own necessarily. They don't have to stand in separate dimensions or whatever. So, as I say, I don't know if that's just me, but I think it just lessens the Cloverfield franchise. You know, I think if it was all meant to tie in together and it was all one narrative flow, I think it would have been better. But, you know, this way they can just keep making money. Slap Cloverfield on anything. Oh, this script's a bit... I don't think we can get it made. Put Cloverfield in it. Boom. But that's based on a very old model of Hollywood, where people will just go, oh, that's got that name on it. I'll go and see it. As we've had more of these connected worlds, these extended universes, and cinematic multiverses created, we're getting a lot more discerning, I think, as viewers, as audiences. And we won't just necessarily run and see the new Cloverfield whatever. I think this is possibly why, it was offloaded to Netflix. I think, really, we've gone sort of full circle with my point on this. The fact that it was teased and dropped very shortly, there was no real hype window, and the fact that, it wasn't in a place where people have got to directly pay for it is very telling. I know Nielsen, I think, recently has started to chart things like streaming services like Netflix as part of their ratings. But I think if we were looking at box office, they're kind of like, oh, we can tabulate that out to box office. Well, we can't. People aren't explicitly paying however much a month, depending on the package, for the Cloverfield Paradox. They're paying for Santa Clarita Diet. They're paying for Altered Carbon. They're paying for the new Godzilla thing, which I've still got to watch. Etc. And they just happened to see that on there. That's what I did. I was like, well, I suppose it's not going to cost me anything. I'll have a look. If I'd have waited until it was in cinemas, if it was going to go to cinemas, if I'd have waited till it was out and heard reviews, I wouldn't have paid money to see it. I'd have waited until it came to Netflix to watch it for free, to see how bad it really was. It's a gamble that I think isn't going to pay off, because I'm not the kind of person to do it, because in a way it's, cutting off my nose to spite my face. I do enjoy my access to streaming services like Netflix. It allows me to watch things that I may not have otherwise looked upon. I'm just like, well, there's no risk. It's not costing me any more to watch the Cloverfield Paradox than anything else. But there are people who would cancel their subscriptions for this kind of thing. So I think Netflix, being as savvy as they are, really needs to sit up and listen and understand what went wrong, and perhaps be a little more discerning about the project that they're willing to put their name to. But I think that's it for this week. I didn't want to sort of have 2 weeks in a row slating some of Netflix's missteps. So next week I've got something that I really enjoyed, that surprised me and brought some new life back to a genre, also that I really love. So I hope you'll join me then. But until then, as always, take care.